Thank you for having me. I want to talk about just a quick overview of what the campaign is. Oh, and really quick, you guys met Jim earlier. He is kind of one of the heads of this operation, so he'll kind of help fill in, help answer questions. But overall, I'll be sharing with you guys as a resident of Woodstock, so I'm super excited and thank you for having me. The Your Two Cents Portland is an initiative petition and now ballot measure. Yes, I believe we exceeded our signatures, which is amazing. But it is now an approved ballot measure for the November 2026 election that will finally bring what is called participatory budgeting to Portland via a voter approved charter amendment. This is co-led by Participatory Budgeting Oregon, Next Up Action Fund, and East County Rising, and endorsed by over 50 organizations and dozens of community leaders. We'll kind of go over like who is involved in the coalition, who's endorsing this later, but that's an overview. But Your Two Cents PDX is a diverse citywide movement advancing the idea that Portland will work better for everyone if every voice counts and every resident can exercise greater power over city budget decisions. That's kind of the fun overview of it. I'm going to get more into the nitty gritty. But why participatory democracy? We have now reached the limits of just being able to choose rulers as opposed to actually being able to choose outcomes. So we've kind of, hit that threshold of we're able to vote on who is in office, but we're kind of outgrown that and we're ready to start being able to be involved in choosing the outcomes that come from having these people in office. So that's just kind of the vibe, the messaging of that. There's another quote that I have later on in my presentation, but I want to mention it as well right now is Sherry Davis. She talks about, I believe she's the director for equity. I forget what it is. I'll get it later. But Sherry Davis, big director lady for equity and stuff. But she talks about how we need to open the doors so wide to City Hall and to accessing to the city that you can't help but walk in. And so that's what we're really trying to do with participatory democracy and participatory budgeting. What is participatory budgeting? It is a democratic process in which community members get together and they get to decide how a portion of our public budget is spent. We'll get more into what the policy looks like, but it'll be 2% of the discretionary funds, which is about 16.4 million for the following year. And we'll talk about kind of how we got that number. But that is why it's called Your Two Cents Portland, 2%, Your Two Cents. So tried to be a little catchy there, have a little fun with it. But yeah, over the last 40 years, participatory budgeting, or PB for short, has provided a rapidly spreading solution to the problems with public budgeting and to the declining public trust undermining democratic institutions. I think we can all, if we haven't seen public trust declining recently, it's already been there, but I'm sure we've all seen it decline in different ways. Also, there's somebody in the waiting room. I don't know if you're able to see that, Brett. Anyways, it began as an innovation of the Brazilian Workers' Party following the end of Brazil's military dictatorship in 1985. I actually think this is my next slide. Let me check really quick. I want to make sure I'm not getting too ahead of myself here. Okay, cool. We're good. Anyways, it began in Brazil. They were the ones who kind of started it. It was really in response to an uprising in like a military dictatorship. So we can see some parallels here in terms of what we are dealing with. And Brazil responded with this process, and it ended up growing rapidly across all the municipalities within Brazil. It has since spread around the world and it takes various forms, but it can be defined in the simplest terms as a democratic process in which residents of a municipality deliberate and directly decide how to spend a portion of a public budget. So then you see this 5-step process on my screen. I'll kind of also talk about this being implemented in other ways that aren't at a citywide level, but it has been done in other ways in smaller groups, and it has proven successful. But you'll start with the process design. So the process can look a little different and there can be different iterations of it. So you bring together a steering committee. I was part of a steering committee that helped design the process for Youth Voice, Youth Vote, which was a East County it was in East County. We did a lot of engagement in East County, but we also were a little past that, and we worked with 5 different nonprofit organizations, as well as tons of youth who got paid to come and submit ideas, go through this entire process. So they brainstormed ideas, they developed projects together. There was a binding vote, and there was implementation. It was really cool. At the time, I'm not a youth. I am in ways, but I'm not technically a youth. So I got to participate in more of an adult role. But it was so fun. It was awesome. I was able to really see everything come to life. And that process, from my point of view, was about 2 years, but the process involving um, the actual youth and the organizations was, Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe a year, about like the community involvement of that.
Yeah, when we went through these 5 steps was
Hmm.
about a year. Yeah, but there was some
Yeah,
pre-work and post-work.
yeah. And don't mind me as I kind of go through this, you guys. There will be a time for questions at the end, but also if you are like, this has to happen now, please feel free to click the little raise hand emoji and I'll try to catch you. But yeah, it's a really cool process, and it gets iterated as it goes is the goal. Sorry, I kind of keep losing my, there we go. Okay, so the idea is that this process is evaluated, refined, and repeated. So there's community feedback as well that is part of this. I believe in the policy that's written, which we'll go over later, it talks about it being audited as well by a city auditor in terms of the Your 2 cents policy. But ideally, it's constantly improving. And then that also typically leads to having more people in your community who are experts on the subject. You have more people who have already gone through the process of civic involvement. And so you're able to have those people sort of go out into their communities and share more about it. Um, Public budgets, we all are aware of them. They're great. Why do they matter so much? And why is reforming the public budgeting process a critical step to improving the public's relationship with government? It is a primary way that governments exercise power is with our money. I think we all know that. Um, Access to this power feels and is highly uneven, and the budgeting process can be highly vague, inaccessible, and unnecessarily technical. I'm sure everybody has differing opinions on this, but that also comes from us all having different educational backgrounds and different backgrounds that we were raised in and different cultural contexts. You could have someone who is considered really, really book smart, but there might be a language barrier. And so a lot of those technicalities can be really difficult for someone who doesn't have a problem with technicalities, but it just might be the language barrier. So this process is really hoping to mitigate a lot of that. Part of writing into the process when we did it with youth was having translated materials as well, and making this something that the youth can go back home and share with their parents who may not be able to speak English, or they might be able to, and they just might prefer having that material in a different language. So those are some examples of sort of different backgrounds and why this matters to be more accessible for everyone. Um, uneven participation leads directly to uneven outcomes. This has been demonstrated by research in many large cities. And I feel like there's not much explanation on that. I mean, the people who show up are going to be the people that typically influence the outcomes. So, okay. I kind of talked about this a little bit, but I want to give Brazil a little more credit. It was designed by workers' movements, so entirely employee-owned process, if you will. These processes were heavily infused with popular education and liberatory practices. Um, Early practitioners sought to foster a democratic culture of participation in poor and working class neighborhoods. This included redistributive measures to disproportionately benefit these neighborhoods. So the early practitioners were already it wasn't completely equitable at first, but it became equitable as more people got involved. Because I think one of the questions I've had is like, what if, you know, this neighborhood specifically ends up more involved in this process, in the Your 2 cents process. And I think the idea is that this process is designed so that there is an even distribution across neighborhood associations, for example. That could be a group that comes together and helps design a project. And then you also get to see what the needs are of other neighborhood association groups, or it could be a nonprofit that is submitting a project, or it could just be an individual neighbor. It doesn't have to be groups of people, and that's also kind of the beautiful part of it. But it also helps us to see this greater picture when we get to see projects developed of what is needed in the neighborhood just next to me. And maybe we have something that can support them. Maybe they have something that can support us, and vice versa. And then maybe this project could be 10 times bigger if we pool our resources together and we see what overlaps within these projects. So that's the idea of participatory budgeting, is to help eliminate kind of that gap of, again, uneven participation leading to uneven outcomes. It's not perfect, but that's also the idea of the process being reiterated as well. So I just also want to point that out. All right. It did start in Brazil in the 80s, but it moved to Chicago in 2009 and it hit Seattle in 2016, which is pretty great. It's moved across other continents as well. It first launched in New York in 2011. So it's hit quite a few big cities, just not yet Portland, but that's where we're working on it. This process, I want to go back to Seattle actually really quick. First, when Seattle launched their PB process, it was youth based as well. So kind of similar to us doing youth voice, youth vote, which I will talk about in a little bit. But this process allocated discretionary dollars by and for youth. Seattle eventually expanded the program to all residents to allocate parks and streets capital dollars in a program that ended up continuing until 2019. In 2020, the Seattle City Council they reallocated 30 million from the police department for public safety programs to be determined through a PB process. Unfortunately, PB did get caught up in the backlash associated with defund the police, and this ended up sapping momentum to renew its earlier programs suspended by the pandemic. That being said, King County, which is obviously the greater area, has continued to move ahead with its own version of participatory budgeting. So that's a really good example of an amazing process led by youth. It kind of ended up losing steam just due to obviously kind of umbrella political affiliations, things like that. But that wasn't an affiliation that was directly drawn to that process. It was just something that I think when people see, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but when people see 30 million being kind of reallocated, we're trying to emphasize that that is not being taken away. It's just simply being, it's the decision making process is different over those dollars. So that's kind of what happened with this, is that that $30 million from the police department was designated to public safety programs, which however you feel about that, that would include police related funding. So I think the hard part there was that whatever kind of side you sat on, it just sounded like money was being taken away from the police department. But the idea was that community could be involved in how their public safety, how that kind of was gone about. And this process allows for city employees, it actually requires city employees to be involved. So it's not just a free for all for citizens as well. It's still a process where you get to understand what's feasible and what isn't, and what the city can support and what they can't. Okay, let me be good on time too. What time did I start? I got like 5 more minutes, I think. Okay, cool. So I want to talk about some of the impacts and benefits. Participatory budgeting is one of the most widely researched forms of participatory democracy in the world. This research has demonstrated a variety of potential impacts and benefits. That includes that it can greatly expand the number and diversity of participants in government, including more youth, non-citizens, women, and residents in low-income areas. And thereby, that helps narrow the participation gap right there. So it's proven to already expand that number, going back to evening out that participation so we can have more even outcomes. It also increases civic leadership and skills of participants. So that leads to people being involved in voting more in elections because they're starting to kind of understand, like, I voted for this project and something came out of it. It's proving that there's a possible quick way to kind of see that return on investment. And I think that also opens up the conversation for people to understand how showing up to vote in an election is another way. It can feel a little more long term, but it's another way that you can make a similar impact, if not greater. So there you go. Let's see. Want to make sure I'm being good on time. It also, yes, it promotes mutual trust among participants and towards governments. So I mean, again, you go through a process, you see it followed through on, and you're able to kind of trust your government, maybe a little bit more, maybe you don't, but you trust your neighbors more. That's cool too. You feel a little more connected with your city. You're able to see things in your city start to reflect what your neighborhood asked for, what your family and friends in a neighborhood 10 minutes away asked for. You're starting to actually see that. Um, it can overall help shift municipal budget priorities favorably to reflect majority priorities as well. So if you're seeing something that you're like, we voted for this, but it's still not being reflected, this is again a way that gives a little more of it's a little more accountability on no, this has to be seen through, and in the way that it was agreed upon between the community and the city. All right, let's see. It's charter mandated, voter approved. That's what we're talking about. It it was 66% voter approved in New York in November 2018, 67% voter approved for the charter in Boston in 2021. Charter mandated participatory budgeting ensures that it won't be a one-off or a subject. So it's not something that ends up being, you don't get your hopes up and 2 years later it's gone. And that was really fun. This is something that is saying the charter, at least how I was explained to me many years ago when we were doing the charter reform, is it's like our city's constitution. So it's if it's in there, the idea is that we hold true to it. Um, well, okay. I'm going to quickly go through this. If you guys have questions about this timeline, we can talk about it at the end, but I really want to get to the youth voice, youth vote quickly. So this started in 2016. And then Jim, feel free to jump in if you feel like I glazed past anything. But Wheeler, his campaign pledge, and then there was a first attempt to get it past city council. Didn't happen. 2018. This is actually at where the nonprofit that I work at, the Rosewood Initiative. There was a community forum in East Portland to kind of pick it back up. And then in 2020, there were proposals that were stymied, unfortunately, and it did not work out yet again. But that's okay because in 2021, I just jumped in. So I'm saying we lightly, I didn't plan this, but we were like, we should get the youth involved. And so we did this amazing project that I mentioned a little bit, Youth Voice, Youth Vote. We had 243 ideas that were collected. We would host meetings on Saturdays. And again, we would pay the youth for their time. So it was like a little side job. And they got to come meet other youth too. There was a ton of community building. It was awesome. It was fabulous. I loved it. When they collected those ideas, and there was a process of project development, and specifically Youth Voice, Youth Vote had youth specific strategies and tactics and activities that were able to help kind of provide framework for how to think about this. So it wasn't, again, we worked within a time frame and there was a design process and it wasn't a free for all. There was a lot of structure that also was able to get your creative juices flowing. So there were like art-based projects for people who maybe aren't so wordy with how to share a narrative on a project. And then they would work with people who were really good writers that could maybe help them build out what are you trying to communicate here. We had 61 budget delegates and 7 youth facilitators. So there were quite a few youth that were able to kind of help guide these groups throughout the process. We had 14 proposed projects. We ended up with 5 projects after the voting process. So we would table, collect votes, kind of share the projects with people. Cool. And then we had these 5 projects. With all of these lovely organizations, Find Your Future Fest, Youth Artist Capital, Beyond SNAP. I know Beyond SNAP was something that specifically aimed to provide hygienic products, different things like that. So a lot of wraparound support outside of SNAP. And they would do that through either a few pop-up events or one resource fair. And again, they were a little more limited with what they could do, obviously, but a lot of them chose to do like a summer-long career development. Or I know Portland's Center for the Arts, they did a really cool one, the Youth Artist Capital. So I think it was like a 3 or 4 week intensive or something like that. And so they got to come and learn alongside amazing artists and kind of dive deep into their craft. And they either it was either free and then they were fed, I can't remember, or they were paid. So that was another part of it, at least with involving youth, is trying to kind of recognize their time and give them an opportunity to make money from a young age. So yeah, that was really fun. It was a fabulous time. 2022 Charter Commission. Jim, can you help with the 2022 part?
Yeah.
What happened in
Sure.
2022?
So the Charter Commission, responding to a number of community groups, including a lot of the youth that were involved in Youth Voice to Vote, crafted a charter amendment based on Boston's that was adopted in 2021 by voters, and almost sent it to the voted to send it to voters. We had one commissioner who was supported but had COVID and was out. So it went to the city council, and the city council at that time was the Wheeler Council, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we love participatory budgeting," but they didn't send it on to the actual voters. So that's was the genesis of this campaign, which made a run at it in 2024, learned a lot, but then postponed to 2026.
Thank you. And now here we are. Beautifully said. Okay, so quick overview of the policy. I'm almost done, and then a few minutes for questions. It's an annual or biannual process open to all residents. Again, like I said, these are binding decisions by residents. The projects that win, that are voted on by it's citywide vote, and this can also involve people who are not. This can involve undocumented people, people who are not. I believe what's the minimum age? Is it there is still a minimum age,
But
right? Or no?
there's no it doesn't say in the policy the movement in PB is to not put a limit age. It
Right.
really people, if you have an opinion, you're old enough to have an opinion and participate. There's really uh, comes down to why not let someone to participate. So,
Yeah.
the city council is going to, these are just provisions
Right.
in this policy. But the city council will refine a lot of these questions, the details on them.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. So yeah, and then this is kind of what I was talking about. It must allocate a minimum equivalent of 2% of the general fund discretionary resources. So that kind of gives you that amount right there. And then this can be district and citywide projects or programs. So it can be an ongoing program or a project to revive a space or something like that. Funding will begin next summer, so a year from now, and then the first PV cycle will begin a year following that. So kind of how I had mentioned, there was, or how Jim and I had mentioned, there was a lot of pre-work, obviously, before diving into the community-facing part of it. Um, but yeah,
Can I add just
okay,
one
this,
thing on that?
yeah, please.
One detail is it's an equivalent of 2% of the general fund discretionary resources to get this amount, but it authorizes the city council to meet that obligation with the entire $8 billion budget. The key thing is that this amount, a lot of participatory budgeting in the United States is small, allocates small amounts, it's low impact, and people, it doesn't ever gets momentum. And so we wanted to aim for something that would meet some minimum best practices and really aim for something more like what they're doing in Europe, in Paris, what they started doing what they've done in Brazil. So there's a number of reasons why that amount was picked, and I can go into it if we want to, but I just wanted to speak to that and the fact that it's not, the money doesn't have to all come from the general fund.
Cool. Thank you, Jim. All right, so kind of an overview. I'll let you guys just look at this. I want to be mindful of time. This is 2024. This was August 2023, and it was polling likely voters for November 2024. And then this one is August 2025, and it was polling likely voters for this upcoming election.
And I think maybe the point is worth mentioning that there's a lot fewer voters in this election than in the 2020.
For
Uh,
sure. Yeah. Yeah. This is an overview of our coalition. I can't remember, Jim, if this has updated or if it was in the
Um,
endorsements that had updated, but
yeah, I don't see some of the unions that have endorsed
okay.
since we did this one, and we've had a lot of endorsements since we put this particular
That's
thing
what I was thinking.
together.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a small view of a lot of the endorsements that we have. We can share more with you guys if you're interested as well. Um, yeah, and I wanted to include this because this is from an older deck, but I wanted to just show because we did surpass this. So we're there, and that's really exciting. We're on officially on our way. That's very exciting. This is kind of how you can help. Obviously, please feel free to ask questions. We can share more information, but off the bat, you can share our information on social media. You can just follow us and do your own research, share with your friends and family. Other things like donate to the campaign as well. Yeah, and then also support the the measure when
And
it
while
comes
we're
time to vote.
done, we are done collecting signatures. We are already this weekend. We're going to be out knocking doors um, in Southeast Portland.
There you go. Cool. So there we go. Questions, reflections. I also have Elizabeth, I see you. I also wanted to say I have some examples of other projects that go deeper into what happened with them if you guys are interested. But Elizabeth, go ahead.
At the very
Oh, do
beginning,
I
there
have
was
to? Sorry.
at the very beginning, I saw the word assemblies. Is that part of the process? What does that mean to have assemblies?
Assemblies.
I mean, what's
Oh,
the
I th
process for getting people
Hmm.
together?
yeah. I think you're talking about the idea collection assemblies, and that looks a lot
I'm
of
trying to find. Okay.
different ways in different cities. This measure allows for uh, basically it to be done within districts, and so it would you probably having like four parallel PV processes, or maybe two one year, two the next year in the city council districts. So those are just gathering in schools, in public places, community centers, and there's a whole. I can send a video. There's examples. It gives you a picture of what that looks like in New York, at least, where people brainstorm ideas of how to spend this money, kind of free form, recognizing there are limits on what it can be spent on, and those parameters get kind of shared so that so it's makes good use of people's time. But that part actually looks like a lot of public engagement because it's really just generating ideas at that point.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, thank you. And just quick question number two. Um, it says your 2 cents PDX is a .com, not .org. What
Oop,
does that mean?
Oh, I didn't see it.
This the
Your two.
slide
hmm.
before this said .com, I thought.
Oh,
Oop.
I didn't see that. But your 2 cents campaign is I mean, we're a political committee registered with the state. So that's what we are. But I mean, that's the campaign's entity. But then we're, of course, a lot of,
Oh, so that makes you a .com
well, .com is like a URL thing, but we're not a business or a
company,
for-profit entity. No,
profit for profit. Okay, yeah.
we're not. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and ask that you end for now. But
Yeah.
if we have any further questions that people want to ask, they can reach out to us or they can reach out to you via the information that you provided. Is there any last things you'd like to say before we move on with our agenda?
No, I just want to say thank you for listening. I am just a citizen like you guys, so I'm not meant to sound super fancy and formal. So hopefully it was somewhat of a relatable presentation, but if I stumbled through some things, I apologize. But also we have lots of answers, and if we don't, we'll find them for you. So please feel free, like Brett said, to pass any questions along to him, and we will answer them as soon as we can. Thank you guys.